So, what brings you here every Sunday morning? Why do you attend these Zoom services, and why a Unitarian Universalist congregation? I mean, we're not a very big denomination, we're not a very big congregation. There are only about 1,000 Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world, and there are about 1 million Unitarian Universalists. 1,000 congregations around the world, 1 million Unitarian Universalists around the world. And in the United States, there are only about 150,000 Unitarian Universalists. So we're not one of the larger denominations. What attracted you to this relatively small group of liberal religious people? I like to think in some ways that song that we just heard by Jackson Browne, in some ways says it for some of us. I came for inspiration. I came looking for grace, and I found my reflection in every passing face, in everyone who gathered. Standing on that shore, searching the horizon, that's our search for truth and meaning, right? Not knowing what exactly for. That's one reason why I came. I'd shared in the past about how I came to Unitarian Universalism and about my own spiritual journey, but I don't know if any of our guests are here today or any of our newer members, but I shared that. And briefly, some of you know, but you new members may not know, that I was born and raised in the Salvation Army. And if you are of a certain age, like me, you know that back then in the 50s and 60s, the Salvation Army was a lot more prominent. You could see them all very often on street corners having meetings and all of those things. I grew up wearing the Salvation Army uniform. I grew up playing the brass instruments, none of them very well at all. I grew up ringing the bells at Christmas time and collecting money. I preached my first sermon on a street corner when I was 13 years old. I was a regular Marjo. You remember Marjo? And I read the Bible through many, many times, backwards and forwards. I learned it. And then some point, when I was around 12, I think, I became interested in other religions. I'd never really known anything else about other religions other than Christianity and Judaism. We had a few Jewish friends in the area, but I didn't know much about them. And then you remember in the Sunday newspapers, there used to be the thing for the Book of the Month Club or something like that. And what I got was what I saw was it was a book club for what they said was mystical kind of writings and teachings and occult things. And one of the things I ordered on that was the I Ching. And that started my interest in other religions. And then gradually, because I was always hanging out in New York City, I ran into the Hare Krishna people. And I became interested in that. And I got involved with them for a couple of years, much to my parents' chagrin. And then I checked out other religious groups too. If you remember New York City at that time, you could walk along the street, especially along Fifth Avenue in front of the library. You'd have different tables set up. There would be the Sun Myung Moon people, the Unification Church, and there would be the Hare Krishna people, and there would be the Jehovah's Witnesses. Everybody was out doing this back then. That was when everybody was worried about cults. Gradually, I left fundamentalist Christianity, left the Salvation Army, and I became interested in Buddhism. And so over the years, I've studied other religions, and my journey eventually led me to find the Unitarian Universalism Church. Part of that journey was finding my wife, who then led me to the Unitarian Universalist Church. But all of our journeys, whoever we are, our journeys are all unique in many ways. And in other ways, they're very similar. We're all looking for something. We're all looking for either a group to be with. We're looking for acceptance. We're looking for truth. We're looking for maybe a combination of all these things. So every so often here at UUCP, especially when we used to meet together, we hold a Sunday service called This I Believe, and that's what we're doing today, where a few of our members briefly share their own journey and tell us how and why they came to Unitarian Universalism and to UUCP. And today we have three of those members here that are going to share that. We have Karen Washington and Michael Meyer-Juan and Arlene Holt-Scala. And so right now I'm going to ask Michael to unmute Karen Washington, and Karen is going to share a little bit about her journey to UUism and UUCP. You're on, Karen.
Good morning. Yes. Okay. Give me a second. Okay. I feel as if I'm standing there. I still got this little stage fright, so please bear with me. I really need to go briefly through my, religious history. It started, wouldn't you know it? Oh. It started before I was born. My mom was raised as a Protestant, and she always felt that, well, no, she told me that, I'm sorry, I don't know how to just turn it off. And plus it's, can't talk. I'm sorry. I started out as a Protestant. She started out as a Protestant, and she was disillusioned with, she moved to New York when she was 5 years old. She was disillusioned with people in her Protestant and other Protestant religions because, as she explained to me, they would walk out of the church and into a bar. And this was sort of her way of just talking about the hypocrisy that she felt in with the principles that they were learning in church and what they were promising to do in church, and how little it meant 10 seconds after they left church. And she thought that Roman Catholics were very reverent and spiritual. So she decided that if she ever had a child, she would bring the child, she would become a Roman Catholic, which she did. So I was raised as a Roman Catholic. The Harlem parish, I lived in Harlem, we lived in New York. The Harlem parish in our neighborhood was very poor. And my mom really resented the fact that what she told me, the rich archdiocese wouldn't give the money to fix the school. The Catholic school in the area had, the roof had caved in, so they could not have regular school in that parish. I would just go twice a week. All the little Catholic kids were lined up and marched over to the church where we had our lessons. And starting at age 5 or 6. And I lived in New York until I was 9. And before we came to Inglewood. And she also resented the fact that the order of nuns in this Harlem parish, in the Harlem area, were named not Sisters of Mercy, they were called the Handmaidens of Mary. And which, she was really upset that they had to be maids, even in the church. Okay. So I moved to New York. None of this took away from the religion. It was just annoyances that my mom passed on to me, her annoyances. So we moved to Inglewood when I was 9. And she decided, well, I might as well put her in Catholic school. And we came to she went to St. Cecilia's, and she said they gave her the runaround. Every time she went, they needed another form or another form. So she finally said, forget it. She just put me in public school. And of course, the public school, she had another runaround because they wanted to automatically put me back a grade. And so she had to bring in school records and whatever, just proving, my father even went and, demanded that if she fails, put her back, but don't put her back automatically. And my mom explained to me it was because I was from New York. Now, through all of this, she never said it was because you're African American. They just brought the fact that you're from New York. I think they assumed that I knew that I was African American, but they shouldn't have assumed that because I wasn't that race conscious. Anyway, so I grew up, I went to college, and by this time I was rather disillusioned with the racism and the sexism that I realized existed in the Catholic Church. Not the religion. The religion was solid. It was just that. And I read in a newspaper out in Ohio about Unitarianism, about a service an ad for a service, somewhere near Ohio. I didn't go, but it sounded sort of interesting. I did a little research, and that was the end of that. So 20 years passed, and I saw an ad for CUC in the paper, the Central Unitarian Church in Paramus. I moved back. Oh, when I moved back home, I moved all the way to Hackensack, a whole 10 minutes away from Inglewood. But and I did not go, but I read the ad and thought, maybe one day. 10 years more passed. Now understand, I'm still a Roman Catholic, solid, but I might go to church once every 2 years. I was driving home, and then 10 years later, and I moved to Inglewood. And I was driving home, and I saw a sign out. No, I was reading an ad about a Unitarian Universalist congregation that met in Flat Rock Brook in New Jersey, in Inglewood. And I didn't know the difference between Unitarian and Unitarian Universalism, but okay, didn't go. Then when I finally moved to Inglewood, I happened to be driving home one day, and I saw a sign that was accidentally left out on Tenafly Road for a Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Palisades. I don't know if it was called congregation or society, whatever. And then on Sunday, I went back just to see what time the service was, because it was around the corner from me. And it was then, it was happening at the moment. So I got out of my car, I came to the front door, and this arm reached out and literally grabbed me and pulled me in to the church. And it was Wally Reed, who was the male half of our founder. And so I came into the service, and I listened to what folks had to say and thought it sounded pretty good. Then they had a social hour afterwards. And I remember, now understand, I'm still, Christian, no doubt about it. And, that wasn't, we were dealing with that right then. But I remember confronting one of the members, Richard Clark, and said, okay, I hear all of these wonderful principles and all, but if your daughter, Richard Carper was white, I said, if your daughter came home with a black guy, how would you feel? What would you say to her? And, he looked and he said, I'd say, come in, have a cup of coffee. And, and I looked and I really didn't really believe him, but okay, he passed the test. So that meant that meant the congregation was sort of passing the test. But I kept coming. And I was a very militant Christian. And there were people at the time in the congregation who were militant atheists, militant heaven knows what. And I was challenged, if I said something that had to do with religion, they felt that it was important to immediately not contradict, but say what they believed. So I was doing a lot of fighting at the very beginning. And, it was like, I'm a Christian, damn it, you know, maybe I'm an agnostic Christian, but don't I have the right in this place to be what I want to be? That's what you say. That's what it says on the book. And, sort of gradually, whether I mellowed or the congregation mellowed or both of us mellowed, um, it sort of, I sort of really eased into, the fact that everybody I met was just so loving and so wonderful, that, I felt it was okay. I stayed here. And, now still was a challenge. There still were challenges here at this congregation because, to put it bluntly, I felt everybody was awfully bougie. Um, and everybody was seemed to be rich and have a lot of money. Social activities, people were having theater parties and going to concerts, and I frankly could not afford to do all this stuff. And but the people were nice, and finally I had the courage to say to somebody, I really can't afford it. I can't go. Rather than just say no. Um, and uh, and then one day somebody approached me and asked me if I would like, I don't know, I'll call it a scholarship to a particular event if I needed help. And they said it would be in confidence, but I get the feeling that some of these things are a little bit of a stretch for you. And frankly, I cannot remember whether I did or I didn't accept the money, but I do remember that I was just so grateful that it was acknowledged that everybody didn't have a lot of money. And I was really struggling at the time. I mean, I had just moved into my house. Um, I had lots of debts and whatever. People have no free cash for lots of reasons. Um, but and that had nothing to do, I thought, with religion. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is sort of part of the principle. It's it's really sort of what Unitarian Universalist maybe is about. And so I started going to classes. I mean, I had already decided that I was an agnostic, um, but it was still like, I'm an agnostic, but if I decide that I want to be a Christian, I have a right, don't I? um, anyway, I started going I learned so much here. I learned so much in the sermons, in adult religious education. I remember a really special course called, I think it was called Finding the Real Jesus. And Bonnie Savitz, who was a member at the time, was leading it. And it was talking about the life of Jesus Christ, the man. And I learned so much, and it meant so much, and and it really helped me in my faith development in terms of realizing that I really believe in principles that he told. I believe in Jesus Christ, the 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 the, the fighter, Jesus Christ, the radical, um, and it sort of helped me on my religious path. And I was still, I still to this day am agnostic, but I feel that I can choose to believe or not, and I choose to believe.
Great.
I don't believe in the Trinity. I'm a Unitarian after all. But I believe there's God, and there is a God because I believe there's a God, and I don't care if there's a God for you. There's a God for me, and I'm a Unitarian after all. Um, and to conclude, all right, I brought my mom to a service one time, and at Liberty School, the first time I brought her, and Tom Shulak was the minister. I had no idea what this sermon was about or what the service was about. But my mother was just so anti-religious, and it was just little things that she said here and there. I mean, she never went to church, but um, she just was just so cynical about religious people. And again, I think it was because of this old feeling of hypocrisy. But so I brought it to the service at Liberty School. After the service, she looked at me and she said, "Now that's what Christianity is all about."
Great.
So that's my story, and that's where I am. And I thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Next up, we're going to hear from Michael Myers, Juan. And go ahead, Michael.
In some ways, my story is somewhat similar to Karen's. I was brought up as a secular Jew. We had a Seder every year. We kind of celebrated Hanukkah, although we were celebrating Christmas more. Once I left my parents' home, I didn't really pursue anything for, a good 20 years. But I felt the need for some kind of spiritual participation. So every once in a while, I would check out the local synagogue. And I was never really comfortable. For me, there was way too much worship of God. And it wasn't what I was looking for, it wasn't what I wanted. So then I started working at a company in South Hackensack with Eileen Karp. And we talked about religion a bit. And she said, you ought to come to one of our services. At that time, we were meeting in Liberty School. So one Sunday I showed up and climbed the stairs. And at the top of the stairs, I met May Stosky, who welcomed me and talked to me. And it was just a completely different experience. And then as I learned a little bit about Unitarian Universalism and the 7 principles, I was particularly interested in the 4th one, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. that, coupled with the friendliness and cheerfulness of the people I had met in the congregation, was all it took. I knew I was home. It's about 22 years ago. And I've never regretted it. You know, I mean, for me, I find my spirituality in the congregation and in exactly what Karen was talking about, this individuality, this freedom for each of us to find our own path. I probably am best described as a secular humanist. I kind of reserve judgment on whether there's a God. I think there is a higher power. For me, that is associated with the physical principles underlying our world, our perception of the world. And as far as beliefs go, I'm happy with that. But for me, our congregation is a big part of my spirituality, both religious and otherwise. And it's also become my family. As Brandy likes to say, you're all my brothers and my sisters, and I love all of you. And I look forward so much to every time that we gather, whether it's on Zoom or in person. And I'm really looking forward to next weekend when I will be coming to Arlene and Donna's and after the service just to get together. So that's what I'm doing here.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you very much. And now Arlene. Michael, if you could unmute Arlene. Michael, can you unmute Arlene?
I'm unmuted.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Interesting, like the connections with what everyone else has had to say. It's just sharing my spiritual journey to Unitarian Universalism. I'll start with my parents. I mean, my father was a German Lutheran, my mother an Italian Catholic. When they married, they had what was called at the time, this was 1942, a mixed marriage. And when you had a mixed marriage, you were married at a side altar, not the main altar of the church. And my Lutheran father had to sign a paper agreeing to raise any of the children that resulted from this union as Catholics. So he did so. And however, my father was a churchgoer and my mother wasn't. So my mother eventually started to going to church with my father. And when I was born and then my brother was born, we were raised in the Lutheran Church. Now, my experiences in the Lutheran Church were very, very positive. What stands out for me is I was always taught that Jesus loved me. That was a very prevalent message in my church. I don't remember any threats of fire and brimstone for any kind of sinning. And I often hear that from others, from my Catholic friends and from other Protestant friends. I had loving Sunday school teachers. I attended summer Bible school, sometimes near my parish, other times up in Bethel, New York, where I stayed with my aunt for some weeks in the summer. And I always enjoyed learning. I attended confirmation classes in the Lutheran Church. I memorized the names of all the books of the Bible. I passed the confirmation tests, was confirmed, and then I became a Sunday school teacher. Then in my late teens, I became interested in Catholicism because of the presence of the feminine, which I did not find in my Lutheran religion. And the feminine was embodied, of course, by Mary. When I married my husband in 1963, and then we went on to have 4 children, we raised our children in a very liberal Catholic parish. It was actually in Cresskill, New Jersey. And the pastor at that time was incredibly liberal and a very loving person. And I also became a Sunday school teacher in that church. I've always been a teacher, it seems. I became active in the peace movement in the 1970s, and I organized a church trip to Washington, D.C. for the Ribbon Around the Pentagon event. This was a peace event, and parishioners from religious organizations around the country created panels. And these panels people held these panels together, and we did, in fact, encircle the Pentagon. It was an amazing, amazing event that I'll never forget. By the late 1970s, however, I could no longer abide by Catholic dogma. I was growing in my feminism, and I started to identify with feminist spirituality. However, my feminist spirituality did not include community. It was very much a personal feminist spirituality. In 1992, I came out as a lesbian. And in 1996, I partnered with Donna, who is now my wife. Early in the new millennium, we wanted to find a church accepting of our relationship. And at this time, I mean, still, LGBT people were not as widely accepted as today, and not to indicate this full acceptance today, but there's a lot more than there was in the 1990s and the early millennium. And in 2005, we attended a UUCP service. At that time, the services were held in a very roomy storefront in Teaneck on Queen Anne Road, and my Brit was the minister. And we found the people so welcoming, but what really hooked us was the welcoming statement that said, we welcome lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. We were amazed. We were immediately in love with the congregation, in love with Unitarian Universalism. We went on to take courses with my Brit, and in December of 2005, we signed the membership book. Several years later, when Eddie Haddon was the board president, he invited me to join the board as a trustee, and I did so. And then a year or so later, I became the secretary for the board. And I continued as secretary into the term of Al Storsky as president of the board. And the following year, when Al stepped aside, Debbie Pires and I became co-presidents of the board, and we continue as co-presidents today. As a UU, I embrace the 7 principles. They really speak, to my view of the world, my sense of spirituality, social justice. They speak to all of my beliefs. And what I also love about Unitarian Universalism is the acceptance of our individual beliefs and our belief systems. And my spirituality grew out of my Lutheranism, my Catholicism, and then my feminist spirituality. And all of these, spiritual paths continue to be part of who I am. Unlike many UUs, I believe there is a spiritual force which I call God or spirit. I know from what I've read, the majority of UUs do not believe in God in the United States today. Okay. And I believe in the power of prayer. I am happy to be a member of this congregation that is committed to social justice. I have been a member of the social justice team and have supported first Al Storsky and now Leandra Pires as leaders of the social justice group. My last public social justice activist participation was in June 2020, when I walked in a Black Lives Matter march along with our minister, Reverend Paul, and several members of the congregation, including Donna Bono and Sidel Postman. And my social justice activity now is more focused on such things as contributing to food pantries, and not right now, I'm not participating in larger public events as I did in the past. I have a long history of participating in a whole range of social justice activities before I was a UU and when I was a UU. And today, I just love our intentionally diverse congregation and our welcoming congregation. I mean, like Michael, I find everyone in this congregation, I feel that we are friends. You are all part of my spiritual life. And I also enjoy social life with so many of you and hope to see everyone at Donna and my home next Sunday, when we'll have our first, dare I say, post-intense pandemic get together. We know the pandemic is still there, but we are doing so much better. And we welcome everyone to our home. Feel free to bring a guest. I'll bake apple pies, and I will provide beverages and chairs and shelter and shady shelter, bathroom, etc. And feel free to bring a brown bag lunch if you like. If you want to bring something to share with people, wonderful. I'll put my address up on the chat board. Again, it will appear in the Weekly Reader, and my Gmail address is already up. You could email me if you like. So I'll borrow Brandy's words. You are my brothers and sisters, and I love all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene. Thank you. And thank you, Michael and Karen, for sharing. So these three members, dear friends, are an example of what I was talking about. Different journeys that are all unique, and yet in so many ways, we're all the same. Just like the rest of the world, we have more in common with each other than that which makes us different from each other. So thank you all for sharing.
If you enjoyed this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video.